we've gotten in trouble for attacking Fox News, for instance.
Is that true?
Yes. We had an episode in which we had Fox News and we had the little news crawl.
Yes.
And that was one of our favorite moments.
Yeah, yes. It was wonderful.
Albert Einstein plus Brad Pitt equals Dick Cheney.
Yes.
That was one of the... Rupert Murdoch, terrific dancer.
Yes.
That was another one. We have been forbidden to do that again. Because the Fox viewer might confuse our cartoon with actual news.
They've become pillars of popular culture, engaging in a tradition of satire that dates back to ancient Greece. A tradition that includes the like of Aristophanes, Voltaire, and Mark Twain.
The real threat here, folks, is that these strict equal time provisions means it won't be long before we see a porno about the Democratic candidate. Who's riding Biden?
Openly mocking politicians.
You're an ass!
And media figures alike.
I'm not a tough guy. This is all an act.
You're breaking my heart,
sensitive.
Bill.
I'm a
If you're an act, then what am I?
But what happens when the joking takes on a life of its own? What happens when the farce becomes real? What happens when comedians such as Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert begin to be taken seriously? Those are the questions we'll look to answer.
Because they're funny. You know, there's funny and then there's funny, I have to say.
Jon Stewart's truly one of our champions.
The Daily Show began in 1996 on Comedy Central with host Craig Kilborn. Airing 4 times a week, the show parodied day-to-day news stories and featured correspondents such as Stephen Colbert.
I can't have put this any plainer, but golly gee willikers.
But in 1999, Kilborn left the show and Jon Stewart manned the helm. Under the new, aptly titled The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, the show became more politically focused and began to rise in popularity.
Boom! There's your paper!
Riding on a ratings high, in 2005, Comedy Central wanted a spin-off series. Stewart and staff pitched it as, quote, our version of the O'Reilly Factor with Stephen Colbert. Comedy Central picked up the series and hasn't looked back since.
Woo! We did it!
The two comedians have also embarked on ventures outside of their programs. Stewart and Colbert hosted the Rally to Restore Sanity and Keep Fear Alive in Washington in 2010. And Colbert attempted to run for president on both major party tickets in 2008.
Well, after nearly 15 minutes of soul-searching, I have heard the call. Nation, I shall seek the office of the President of the United States!
And the show has influenced the way some Americans get their news. Viewers that get their news from only The Daily Show were more informed than viewers of MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News. That's according to a survey of Americans conducted by Farley Dickinson University's Public Mind Poll in May 2012.
I mentioned Fox News viewers were the most consistently misinformed viewers. In every poll, PolitiFact took issue with that and said, I really shouldn't have said every poll. It was just most.
A 2013 study by the University of Cambridge in London also found that liking the Colbert Report on Facebook is an indication of intelligence.
Nation, if you like my show, you are smart. End of story. Don't ask questions. That's not what smart people do.
Purchase College political science professor Connie Lobur believes that these findings are an indictment of the news media and show what Americans look to the news for.
The TV, the cable networks, the internet, all of those things, we kind of look at them more as entertainment sources than necessarily for educational sources.
Lobur believes the news media is more interested in bottom-line economics than delivering information, even if it is hard truths.
The networks, as business interests, don't want to lose any part of any audience. If they want to capture as much as possible, and being tagged as liberal or conservative is a calculated risk that they take about how far they would let things, I think, come through that they thought would lose revenues for them.
So where do The Daily Show and the Colbert Report fit into informing the public?
And sometimes they bring up things that the people would never hear about otherwise. One, because people don't read newspapers. Two, I don't know how many people, younger people in particular, aren't watching the nightly news to get those headlines repeated to them.
The Daily Show and the Colbert Report are political satire first and news coverage second. But why do these programs succeed where other political satire falls flat?
The attempts to be funny that seem a little too mean-spirited, too sarcastic, too cynical, those kinds of comedians or that kind of entertainment that might be politically centered, doesn't sell very well to very many people. Most people would prefer lighter comedy, sort of ha-ha kind of comedy, and not stuff that makes you think at the same time while you're laughing.
This satire entices many people, particularly young people, to learn about the issues so they can sincerely laugh at the jokes. Vladimir Nabokov once said satire is a lesson.
Colbert and Stewart have two things going for them. They really have their comedic chops down, but then they have the advantage of being really smart.
But what is it that gives these two comedians the perception of credibility?
Their intelligence is that the kinds of questions they ask indicate the depth of their own knowledge, as opposed to just pandering to rhetorical cliches and, easy hits at the other side. They kind of done their homework, and that's what makes them, I think, more respectable, is it's evident they've done their homework.
In essence, they walk a fine line between informative newscast and straightforward entertainment.
If you put a statement in the form of a question, is that journalism?
And Lobur feels there is value in learning something while seeking entertainment.
One, I think that there's no reason why becoming more informed can't also be experienced as an entertaining experience. I like thinking, for instance, when any of us learn something brand new, that there's kind of an excitement about it, like, oh, wow, I never knew that before.
But when does any of this translate into results in politics and policy? Let's take a look at some examples, starting with how politicians address the media. The Colbert Report began airing a segment called Better Know a District in October of 2005. Colbert would interview members of the House of Representatives about their congressional districts. This oftentimes resulted in an embarrassing misstep for the representative for comedic effect.
Can you think of any better building to put the Ten Commandments in than in a public building?
No. I think if we were totally without them, we may lose a sense of our direction.
What are the Ten Commandments?
What are all of them? You want me to name them all?
Yeah, please.
Despite situations like this repeating themselves, many more members of Congress appeared on the show.
Stephen Colbert's harder to, I think, for people to really figure out whether he's like being straight with you or whether he's kidding, because of the persona that he has on this show.
The segment drew some attention when former Florida Congressman Robert Wexler appeared on the show in July 2006. Congressman Wexler was running unopposed, and Colbert coaxed him into saying something that would cost him the election if he were challenged.
I enjoy cocaine because it's a fun thing to do. I enjoy the company of prostitutes for the following reason. Oh, because it's a fun thing to do.
Okay, much like cocaine.
Much like cocaine. If you combine the two together, it's probably even more fun.
Comments like that caused a minor uproar for Congressman Wexler.
We had to shake our head in amazement at this next clip from the Comedy Channel's The Colbert Report, an interview with Florida Democratic Congressman Robert Wexler, who we want to mention again is unopposed in the November election.
By 2007, after many more Better Know a District episodes continued in a similar vein, former Illinois Congressman Rahm Emanuel began advising Democratic members of Congress not to appear on the show.
Apparently, Emanuel, who's got a reputation as a bit of a tough guy, thinks my Better Know a District series could threaten the Democratic stranglehold. Hey, I don't blame him. He's just playing politics. He's got to answer to his left-wing constituents.
Members of Congress appear to have heeded former Congressman Emanuel's advice. Before the story broke on March 19, 2007, 39 members of Congress had appeared on Better Know It District. 6 years later, only 23 members had appeared on the series.
It's probably better just for your own sake to stay away from some of that, because he's too fast for you. You know, the humorless should stay away from these shows.
Former Congressman Robert Wexler could not be reached for comment, nor could now Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. In February 2012, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi appeared on the Colbert Report. Colbert and the Congresswoman reached an agreement.
Can we make a deal?
Anything.
This Disclose Act, is it important to you?
Yes, it's very important.
If I throw my weight behind the Disclose Act, if I support the Disclose Act, will you encourage the Democratic members of the House of Representatives to do my Better Know It District series?
It's a deal.
So does this affect the way politicians address the media?
Oh, yeah, for some of them, but you know, that's just so silly.
Well, there you go. Our next example takes a look at how these programs affect business and policy in the United States Congress. The Daily Show is in the congressional record. It occurred during a debate on the Blunt Amendment, which would allow employers to decline to provide birth control as part of their health care plans. On February 28, 2012, California Senator Barbara Boxer attempted to quote a Daily Show bit on the floor of the Senate.
Jon Stewart took this issue on and said, well, I'll tell you something. I love the Blunt Amendment because he says, I'm an employer and I believe that humor is the best medicine.
All right, first of all, I can't possibly sound that Jewish.
The amendment was defeated in the Senate by a vote of 51 to 48, and the influence The Daily Show had is questionable at best. But even though The Daily Show has been referenced on the floor of the United States Senate, Stephen Colbert holds the distinction of testifying before Congress. On September 23, 2010, Stephen Colbert aired a report in which he assumed the role of a migrant worker for a day as part of the Take Our Jobs Please campaign.
And just pull up the whole plant like that?
No, then you damage the plant and there's no more beans.
What?
If you pull that out, there'll be no more work.
What?
If you pull the whole plant, there'll be no more work.
But I got all the beans on that one. Look at that. And then I'll just replant it. Stick it back there. It's back in. Now it's all back in there. That's good.
Colbert was invited to testify by Representative Zoe Lofgren, former chair of the House Subcommittee on Immigration. Colbert joined a long-standing tradition of celebrities testifying before Congress, joining supermodel Christy Brinkley, Jewel, Backstreet Boy Kevin Richardson, and Elmo.
I am happy to use my celebrity to draw attention to this important, complicated issue. And I certainly hope that my star power can bump this hearing all the way up to C-SPAN 1.
The invitation created a minor stir for some in the media. Some called it a waste of Congress's time. Others were under the false impression that it would cost taxpayers a substantial amount of money.
I mean, the idea that we're going to waste our taxpayer dollars for this guy to go up on Capitol Hill and we're supposed to sit there and take that?
No! You're supposed to sit there and blow it out of proportion. Read your contract.
Despite the concern and criticism of the media, and even being asked to leave by Representative John Conyers, Colbert testified before the subcommittee on September 24, 2010. Similar to the tone of the Colbert Report, he testified in character, making some points in jest.
America's farms are presently far too dependent on immigrant labor to pick our fruits and vegetables. Now, the obvious answer is for all of us to stop eating fruits and vegetables.
And some more serious.
Maybe we could offer more visas to the immigrants who, let's face it, will probably be doing these jobs anyway. And this improved legal status might allow immigrants recourse if they're abused. And it just stands to reason to me that if your coworker can't be exploited, then you're less likely to be exploited yourself.
Colbert also shared what he'd learned in the fields about the working conditions of migrant farm workers.
But after working with these men and women, picking beans, packing corn, for hours on end, side by side, in the unforgiving sun, I have to say, and I do mean this sincerely,
Please don't make me do this again. It is really, really hard.
After the testimonies of the expert witnesses, the subcommittee began its interrogation. Colbert was questioned by several members. As with his testimony, he answered some questions in character.
How many of those individuals were illegal and how many were legal?
I didn't ask them for their papers, though I had a strong urge to.
But when asked by California Congresswoman Judy Chu about why he was interested in the issue of migrant labor, Colbert gave a very candid response.
I like talking about people who don't have any power. And this seems like one of the least powerful people in the United States are migrant workers who come and do our work, but don't have any rights as a result. And yet we still invite them to come here, and at the same time ask them to leave. And that's an interesting contradiction to me.
Media coverage of the testimony was widespread, but again, the influence the testimony had on the politics and policy involving migrant workers is questionable given Colbert's closing statements.
I trust that following my testimony, both sides will work together on this issue in the best interest of the American people, as you always do.
We've taken a look at how The Daily Show and The Colbert Report affect politics, but in our next example, we'll look at how The Daily Show embarrassed Senate Republicans and got a law passed. John Feal was a first responder on September 11, 2001. As a result, he lost half his foot to gangrene. After years of therapy and surgeries, he managed to rebound.
I fought for my benefits. I'm not going to say I won, but when I did eventually win my benefits, other people were like, well, how'd you do it? And through support groups, I became known as that guy that can help.
There was only one problem. The effort to supply federal funds for aid was being held up in Congress. In 2005, Feal created the Feel Good Foundation to help first responders and to push Congress to act. The foundation is run here out of his Long Island home.
The Feel Good Foundation is basically just a reaction to the lack of action by our federal government. I would never be in existence if they would have did what was morally right.
A law to give federal aid to first responders had been proposed and postponed since the first evidence that the workers on the pile suffered terrible health consequences. The Bush administration frequently stood in opposition.
So their disregard for human life was evident. And if that sounds strong, I don't apologize.
The James Zadroga bill was named after the first responder to die of illness contracted at Ground Zero. It would allocate $4.2 billion in health care benefits, paid for by closing a tax loophole on foreign corporations.
It's a win-win-win-win. Just do it!
But in 2010, 9 years after the attacks, the bill was stalled in the Senate due to a Republican filibuster. The Democrats were unable to muster a supermajority of 60 votes to pass the bill.
Perhaps we should start running this ad.
Have you seen the news?
I know.
The Republicans sure are assholes.
I know. But the Democrats are such pussies.
What can we do?
Call your congressperson and tell them they're just terrible.
Feal had brought buses full of sick first responders to the Capitol to push members of Congress to support the bill. But after the 9th anniversary of the attacks, national media coverage was almost non-existent.
But I don't know who's covering it in their news. You know, those articles even about that bill as it was kind of hanging in there and it was looking like it was starting to die. You know, 4 or 5 pages or more into the New York Times.
And as the Christmas recess drew near, Republicans would not rescind the filibuster. But that's when Feal got a call.
Jon Stewart's assistant called me and she said, Mr. Feal, can Mr. Stewart talk to you? And I was like, yeah, you know.
Stewart offered Feal the opportunity to appear on an episode of The Daily Show devoted to Congress's inability to pass the Zadroga bill.
And he's like, John Feal, check this out. You're going to come on my show. We're going to embarrass Republicans. We're going to get the bill passed. And he said it with such conviction, like it was such an easy thing, like he already knew that the bill was going to pass once, you know, he put this on his show.
Feal had to decline. He was going to be in Washington lobbying lawmakers to pass the bill in the 11th hour.
And he paused for a second, and he goes, "What do you mean you can't come on my show?" Like I insulted him or something.
But Stewart was quick to offer a solution.
And he goes, "All right, check this out." And right like that, he goes, "Give me 4 guys. We'll put them on the show. And we'll do a roundtable discussion. And we'll embarrass Republicans. And we'll get the bill passed."
Feal selected Kenny Specht, Chris Bauman, Ken George, and John Devlin to advocate for their cause on The Daily Show.
What you're going to do on the Jon Stewart show is really important, and you need to not only advocate for yourself on that show, but to advocate for your brothers and sisters who are sick and dying.
Before speaking to the responders, Stewart ridiculed Congress and the coverage of the 9/11 anniversary that failed to mention the responders.
When I watched the second plane fly into the building, I was there. I had a safety deposit box in a Chase Bank underneath. You can still see the outline of the dollars. You want to know why I have passion for this thing? This is why.
Yeah, we lost a lot of good cash that day.
The second segment of his show was devoted to speaking to the responders about their medical conditions and their reactions to the impasse in the Senate.
Bill, what's going through your mind as you're watching this process go down?
Well, we're disgusted, we're disappointed, and unfortunately we're hurt. We are proud protectors of the Constitution, for the people, by the people,
right?
And we want to know where it was lost.
I can only speak for myself. When I died twice last year fighting this cancer. While I'm fighting for the cancer, I was fighting for the compensation that would cover my bills.
The Daily Show drew a national spotlight on the issue, and the story was quickly picked up by the mainstream media.
Jon Stewart and The Daily Show at Comedy Central did a great service on their show last night.
Stewart, it was Jon Stewart's last one of the week, and okay, we watch it, whatever. And he's just flat on absolutely right.
Despite everyone else's inability to focus on the matter for any significant amount of time, he refused to stop covering the 9/11 first responders bill.
And these people ran to Ground Zero to save people's lives, and we're not going to even give them medicine for the illnesses that they got down there. It's disgusting. It's a national disgrace. It's a shame, and everybody who voted against it should have to stand up and account for himself or herself.
And Stewart was credited by many, including the White House, for bringing the issue to the forefront of the American public's minds.
I think, if something isn't on the American public's mind and isn't pushed in their face almost all of the time, they can that quickly forget about it.
But it was really Jon Stewart and The Daily Show that brought national attention to this. And like Senator Gillibrand, Jon Stewart's truly one of our champions.
5 days after the show aired, the Zadroga bill was passed by the Senate. It was signed into law by President Barack Obama on January 2nd, 2011.
It took a sit-down comedian to bring out an important issue, to embarrass leaders across the nation and shame them into doing what's morally right.
In our final example, we'll see how Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart were players in the 2012 presidential election. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals, unions, and corporations could spend unlimited amounts of money on political elections in the landmark case Citizens United v. Federal Elections Commission.
Oh, that said that's corporations are people and people have free speech, therefore money is speech and corporations can give unlimited money to political issues.
It sure did. And Stephen Colbert was quick to take advantage. After an unsuccessful run for president in 2008, Colbert decided to file for a Political Action Committee, or PAC, with the Federal Election Commission. PACs are the vehicles that enable unlimited spending on campaigns.
Those cheers are legally binding. That's it. Colbert PAC is going to be real. We're going to do it.
Colbert hit a small snag, however. The parent company of Comedy Central, Viacom, became concerned that it could face charges due to the network funding the show. The network is part of a corporation, and corporations are not allowed to give money to PACs.
Okay, so I've got the forms. These are the forms we use to fill out. These are the actual legal forms we use to fill out for my PAC. So I guess I'll just shred these.
To get around the technicality, Colbert instead filed a request with the FEC to form a super PAC.
What's a super PAC? Is that like a PAC that got bitten by a radioactive lobbyist?
A super PAC is a PAC that is made up of corporations or unions. In layman's terms, a super PAC would absolve Viacom of legal responsibility, and Colbert personally went to the FEC to request a super PAC.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to say, we won! And so can you!
The ruling of Citizens United v. Federal Elections Commission is admittedly complicated, but Colbert brought the issue to light to people who otherwise may not have heard about it, much less understood it.
It really opened it up to see the disparities, to see how, to expose a very broad audience to the idea that there's just the millions and millions and millions of dollars that unrestricted going into campaigns by people and from people that no one had ever heard of.
Colbert's super PAC began taking donations and spending them on campaign ads supporting and opposing various candidates throughout the campaign.
On August 13th, write in Rick Perry. That's Perry with an A for America.
Thankfully, there is one name on the ballot that stands for true Americanity: Herman Cain.
If Mitt Romney really believes
corporations are people, my friend,
then Mitt Romney is a serial killer. He's Mitt the Ripper.
What was most poignant about the mock political ads was their striking similarity to actual ads run for presidential candidates.
And on the issues, new spin on all sides.
Governor Romney cares about big business. He cares about tax cuts for wealthy people. And I certainly do not believe that he cares about my hardworking employees.
But what kind of effect did Colbert's super PAC have on the politics of unlimited donations to political causes?
I think he did an enormous amount because he's an entertainment figure who actually jumped into the system rather than just talk around it. It caused other news outlets to cover him.
It's true. News outlets in the mainstream media began covering Colbert's super PAC each time a political ad hit the airwaves.
Stephen Colbert making headlines this morning.
Now, this funny little idea has become a political reality.
This morning, the Republican presidential field isn't laughing about Stephen Colbert.
But it's a clear sign that campaign finance rules are loosening.
And whether these guys are playing fair, and whether this whole Citizens United case, which allowed super PACs and unlimited, unregulated money to get into campaigns, is a good idea. That's a debate that is worth having, and Stephen Colbert is having it.
Before the South Carolina Republican primary, some polls indicated that Colbert could make some noise if he chose to run, despite not being on the ballot. Legally, however, he could not be a candidate and run a super PAC. On January 12, 2012, Colbert transferred control of Colbert's super PAC to trusted friend Jon Stewart.
Now that I have the super PAC, it is mine. Can I run ads supporting Stephen Colbert, who I believe in very deeply, and perhaps attacking his potential opponents, who I don't believe in at all?
Yes, you can, as long as you do not coordinate.
Well, that's interesting.
Colbert's super PAC, now renamed Definitely Not Coordinating with Stephen Colbert's Super PAC, under Jon Stewart, continued to run ads attacking frontrunners Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich.
Donate today, and we'll destroy both these guys and their super PACs with a merciless ad torrent so fierce they'll wish they'd never been incorporated. An orgy of pure distortion, leaving nothing behind.
While everything was running smoothly on the legality of super PAC coordination, there was a problem on the presidential run front. It was too late to get on the Republican primary ballot in South Carolina. To get around this, Colbert encouraged his supporters to vote for Herman Cain. He would assume any votes for Herman Cain were support for him.
Send them a message. On January 21st, vote Herman Cain.
Colbert's super PAC also pushed to place a non-binding referendum on the primary ballot in which South Carolina Republicans would declare they believe, quote, corporations are people or only people are people.
And because he's directly involved himself into politics by running for office and getting himself on a ballot, you know, I mean, all not quite in jest. I mean, you know, it's sort of that, again, talk about a fine line there about taking entertainment to a level of realism.
The ballot initiative was later removed from the ballot after the South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that non-binding questions could not be placed on a presidential primary ballot.
I believe that South Carolina deserves the right to vote for something that couldn't possibly have an effect. After all, John Huntsman's on the ballot.
Herman Cain and or Stephen Colbert received 1% of the vote in the primary and no delegates.
We are the 1%! Eat it, others and statistical anomalies. We made it to integers.
After a disappointing showing at the polls, Colbert suspended his exploratory committee, effectively ending a presidential bid. Unbound from already loose FEC regulations, Colbert recovered his super PAC from a reluctant Jon Stewart.
You don't have to give it to me, John.
I'm gonna take it from you.
Baby, don't take it!
News coverage of Colbert's Super PAC and its activities continued as Super PACs flooded the 2012 presidential campaign with more than $560 million, including $98 million the week before the election. Some argue that Colbert played an important role in keeping the issue relevant.
People wouldn't know about that. It was a pretty brilliant tack to take about a subject that's very important to, I think, the quality of our democratic, our electoral processes.
After the 2012 presidential election, Colbert's Super PAC was shut down, and the remaining funds were donated to aid injured soldiers, Hurricane Sandy relief groups, and groups lobbying for campaign finance reform.
The two groups get the money only if they named the conference room at the Center for Responsive Politics the Colbert Super PAC Memorial Conference Room. And in the Campaign Legal Center, they will now hold their meetings in the Hamrove Memorial Conference Room.
And while Colbert's Super PAC did not change any laws, it did stir discussions about how and how much money is spent on political campaigns. And there are still efforts to overturn the Citizens United ruling.
Thank you! God bless you all! And God bless Citizens United! We'll be right back!
There is a line between entertainment and information, but that line is often blurred. And it is imperative that we, as viewers, news consumers, and decision makers as voters are able to tell the difference. But the blurring of the line is not necessarily bad. It has opened up people's eyes to issues they may not have seen or known about otherwise. We've seen The Daily Show and the Colbert Report mentioned in the United States Congress, in debate and in investigations. We've seen the issue of unlimited funding for elections explained in an informative way, made all the more memorable through comedy. We've seen lawmakers shamed into passing a bill into law that otherwise would have languished. We've seen that The Daily Show and the Colbert Report not only affect the way we get our news, but the worlds we live in. I'm Thomas J. Falletta. Good night, and Godspeed.
Donald Trump, we work hard. And you do this, you disrespect us in our own house. Scattergooch. You can put your name on everything. You can build your glass and gold painted buildings to the sky, blocking out the Central Park sun. It's fine, it's fine. But you invite an important visitor to our house, to our town, and eat your pizza with a fork right in front of us. Who the do you think you're... You know what? Hey, why don't you take a Fiorello LaGuardia's hat and feed it to Joe DiMaggio's crying ghost on Liberty Island, you son of a bitch! You son of a bitch!